China, draw an imaginary line from Heihu in the northeast to Tengchong in the southwest, a fascinating fact jumps out at you. A massive 94% of Chinese citizens live squeezed to the east of the line, while the remaining 6% are scattered all over the enormous expanse of land to the west. Why is this the case in modern China? Turns out there are some interesting reasons. China is a vast country with a population of 1.4 billion and a population density of 145 people per square kilometer. The population is split into 4 major linguistic groups: Mandarin, Wu, Yue, and Min. The majority of the population is ethnic Han Chinese, which accounts for about 92% of China's population. The remaining 8% is made up of 55 ethnic minority groups, such as the Zhuang, Hui, Manchu, Uyghur, Miao, Mongolian, Tibetan, and Yao. However, what has come to be known as the Hu Line has arguably become China's most important geographical feature, with demographic, economic, cultural, and political implications for the country's past, present, and future. But it's not on any official map of China, nor is it on the actual terrain of the People's Republic. There are no monuments at its ends, not in Heihe in the north, which is just an icy swim across the Amur from Blagoveshchensk in Russia's far east, nor in Tengchong in the south, which is set among the hills that roll into Myanmar. There is no line to speak of along the 2,330-mile or 3,750-kilometer diagonal that connects both those dots. The Hu Line is both invisible and fictitious. Nonetheless, the Hu Line's point is as relevant today as it was when it was first conceived. Hu Huangyong, a Chinese demographer, used a hand-drawn map of the line to illustrate his article on the distribution of China's population in the Chinese Journal of Geography in 1935. The point of the article and the map is that China's population is unevenly distributed, and not just a little, but a lot. The area west of the line accounted for 64% of China's territory, but only 4% of its population. In contrast, 96% of Chinese people lived east of the geodemographic demarcation line, as Hu referred to it, on only 36% of the land. Much has changed in China since Hu drew his line. The once weak post-imperial republic has evolved into a highly centralized world power. Its population has nearly tripled, from 500 million to nearly 1.4 billion people. However, the fundamentals of the imbalance have remained virtually unchanged. China acknowledged Mongolia's independence, reducing the area west of the Hu Line. Nonetheless, the distribution in 2015 was as follows. West of the line, 6% of the population occupies 57% of the territory, with an average population density of 39.6 people per square mile or 15.3 per square kilometer. East of the line, 94% of the population lives on 43% of the territory, with an average population density of 815.3 people per square mile or 314.8 people per square kilometer. This fascinating population distribution is even visible from space. Satellites see the area to the east twinkle with lantern-like strings of light at night, while the west is a blanket of near-total darkness, punctuated only occasionally by signs of life. So what exactly is the reason for this wild population distribution? The answer lies in the weather conditions of China, which makes it harder for life to flourish in the western side of the country. To start with, there is a massive difference in the amount of rainfall the west and east of China gets, and this is due to a unique weather condition known as rain shadow, and this condition causes desertification, the bane of agriculture. Mountains and other topographic features also have a significant impact on precipitation. Rain shadows or dry regions on the protected side of some mountain ranges can be among the driest places on the planet. Rain shadows are formed by a variety of factors, including prevailing winds, topographic features, and local weather patterns. Prevailing winds are wind patterns that frequently occur in specific locations. When a mountain range runs perpendicular to prevailing winds, moisture is carried toward the mountains on the windward side. If the winds have a long fetch, the distance the wind can travel over open water, the air will become very moist. Rain occurs when prevailing winds push moist air against topographic features such as mountains, forcing it upward. The air rises and cools when the wind meets the mountains. Rain falls when water vapor in the air condenses. Orographic precipitation is rain and snow that falls as a result of an air mass colliding with a topographic feature. Because of this rainfall, the windward sides of mountain ranges tend to be lush and vegetated. The lee sides of mountain ranges with these weather conditions, on the other hand, are in the rain shadow and can be very dry. Orographic precipitation depletes the moisture content of this air. The air is relatively dry by the time it passes over the mountains. This dry air warms as it moves down the lee side of a mountain range, allowing it to retain even more water vapor. This increases evaporation in these areas because the dry air draws moisture from the landscape and speeds down the mountain. This can result in fierce foehn winds, which are common in rain shadows and can cause dramatic temperature and humidity increases. Land in a rain shadow is arid with little cloud cover. Much of western China's territory is mountainous, with some of the world's highest mountain ranges, including the Himalayas, Tian Shan, Kunlun Shan, Karakoram, Pamir, and Altai, as well as extensive plateaus like Tibet. The country's northwest is made up of vast desert and semi-desert areas such as Jungar Pendi, which is surrounded by the mountain ranges Altai to the north, which exceeds 4,000 meters in height, and the mountains Tian Shan to the south, which rises up to 7,439 meters in Jengish Chokusu, which is located along the border with Kyrgyzstan in the Kokshal-Tau chain. The Taklamakan Desert is bordered to the south by the imposing Kunlun Shan Mountains, which stretch from east to west for more than 3,000 kilometers and reach heights of over 7,000 meters at various points. The Kunlun Shan Mountains meet the Pamir Mountains to the west along the border with Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Here in Chinese territory are the peaks of Kongu Targ at 7,649 meters and at Muztagh Atta at 7,546 meters. The vast Tibet Plateau, some 2,500,000 square kilometers in size, lies to the south of the Great Kunlun Shan chain with an average altitude of 4,500 to 4,900 meters. The plateau is crossed by numerous chains and is closed southward from the Himalayas, northward from the Kunlun Shan and Kilian Shan, and westward from the Pamir and Karakoram. In fact, China has 9 of the world's 14 mountains that exceed 8,000 meters, including the highest mountain on the planet, Mount Everest, which is located along the border with Nepal. These tall ranges contribute to many deserts found in western China. For example, the famous Gobi Desert lies to the east of the Tian Shan Mountains, along the border with Mongolia. And further south, beyond the Tian Shan chain, is one of the most arid deserts, the Taklamakan, measuring 270,000 square kilometers. All these deserts make living in western China difficult, and people have migrated eastward in search of a better life. And as if having deserts is not enough of a problem, these deserts are expanding. Yet the problem is exacerbated by the aggressive spread of these deserts, swallowing up huge swathes of land that could have been used for agriculture. Desert covers approximately 20 to 28% of China, and the amount of desert in China is increasing year after year. In fact, China has the fastest rate of desert formation in the world, with old deserts expanding and new deserts forming. Desertification occurs at a rate of approximately 3,370 square kilometers, 1,300 square miles per year, an area nearly the size of Rhode Island, with an area the size of New Jersey becoming desert every 5 years. Millions of rural Chinese have fled to the east due to desertification, abandoning unproductive land in Gansu, Inner Mongolia, and Ningxia provinces. According to an Asian Development Bank study, 4,000 villages were at risk of being engulfed by drifting sand. In China, migration on the scale of the Dust Bowl in the United States in the 1930s has already occurred. The only problem is that there is no California to escape to in China. Many of those displaced by desertification have ended up as migrant workers in eastern cities, expanding the population in these cities even more. Significant rain has not fallen in parts of Ningxia province in years, making farming virtually impossible. Tens of thousands of people have been relocated from villages in poor southern Ningxia to 215,000 acres of newly irrigated land near the Yellow River in north-central China. The exodus occurred between 1998 and 2000 and cost approximately $325 million. And yet the government says that more than 150 million people will have to be moved in the future. Agroeconomist Lester Brown said that around 24,000 villages in China's northwest had been totally or partially abandoned since 1950. The vast Taklamakan and Kuntang deserts in western China are expanding so rapidly that they're expected to merge in the not-so-distant future. Two deserts in Inner Mongolia and Gansu province are also on their way to meeting and merging. Between 1994 and 1999, the Gobi expanded by 52,400 square kilometers or 20,000 square miles, an area half the size of Pennsylvania. It now advances at a rate of 2 miles per year and is only 240 kilometers or so from Beijing. Poor and dry provinces like Ningxia and Qinghai have been hardest hit, with populations falling to 6.3 million and 5.63 million in the last decade respectively. And there is another reason the eastern side of China is more attractive to settlement: temperature variation. Western China has some of the most extreme temperature differences between summer and winter. Kashgar, for example, has an average minimum temperature of -11 degrees Celsius or 12 degrees Fahrenheit in January and an average high temperature of 33 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit in July. In fact, much of Xinjiang and Tibet are not recommended for tourists between November and April. Xinjiang in particular has uncomfortably hot summers from June to August. But the differences between Western and Eastern China go beyond weather patterns. There are economic realities separating the two regions. Over the last 2 decades, China's 12 Western provinces' contribution to GDP increased from 4% to slightly more than 20%. According to government data, the East Coast contribution remains well above 50%. Foreign direct investment inflows to the Western region account for less than 7% of total FDI inflows in China, while FDI inflows to the Eastern regions account for nearly 85%. More than 2 decades ago, China began its economic reform and self-styled opening up process in the hopes of developing the country's backward economy and raising the living standards, incomes, and quality of life of its citizens. Deng Xiaoping, the architect of China's economic reforms, stated that while some Chinese may become richer faster than others, he believed that the rest of China would benefit from the reform process. Well, there are numerous indications that wealth has arrived in China and for its people. The thriving metropolises of Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing are proof that some Chinese have become wealthy. However, the economic prosperity brought about by economic reforms resulted in significant geographic imbalances. Western China was largely ignored as foreign direct investment poured into port cities and special economic development zones in the east and south. Western China, which is home to the majority of China's ethnic minorities, has remained relatively impoverished, with inadequate infrastructure, underdeveloped schools and healthcare, and high unemployment rates. Fearing a backlash from ethnic minorities in Xinjiang and Tibet, Chinese leaders launched a program to develop the Western region. The Chinese Communist Party has given the program, known as the Go West campaign, its full support. The Go West campaign seeks to redirect significant amounts of central government spending, foreign direct investment, and international economic development funding to Western regions. Its goals are to develop the underdeveloped economy and infrastructure as well as to raise living standards in the West. Many critics, however, question the government's sincerity. They argue that the campaign is an excuse for China to exploit the vast natural resources of the Western region while imposing strict security measures to prevent ethnic separatists from breaking away from China. They express concern that building physical infrastructure will attract a large number of ethnic Chinese, undermining many of the West's unique ethnic minority cultures. Critics also fear that development will devastate the Western region's ecosystem. The United States Congress, for example, is concerned about China's treatment of ethnic minorities in the Western region, as well as restrictions on religious freedom and involuntary resettlement. And aside from human rights concerns, Congress is concerned about market access and fair competition for U.S. businesses looking for opportunities in the Western region. However, if Western China is harsh for habitation and is backward compared to the East, why does China care about it? The answer lies in what lies under the ground: natural resources. For example, Xinjiang is said to have treasure on every mountain and oil in every basin because of its 3 large mountains of Altai, Tian Shan, and Kunlun, as well as its 2 great basins of Zhanggar and Tarim. The Altai mountain in the north is named after the place where gold is mined. According to a legend, Altai mountain has 72 ditches, each of which contains gold and jewels. Altun mountain, located in the south, is also named after gold. Mineral resources are widely dispersed, with over 100 significant metallogenic belts. Oil, gas, coal, and mineral salts are found in large basins such as Tarim, Zhanggar, and Turpan, as well as gold, iron, non-ferrous metals, rare metals, and non-metallic mines in the mountains such as Altai, Tian Shan, Kunlun, and Altun. Several of the 122 minerals discovered have the largest reserves in the country. Beryllium, muscovite, natron, saltpeter, pottery clay, and serpentine are examples. Iron ore reserves are estimated to be 730 million tons, while salt reserves are 318 million tons, mirabilite reserves are 170 million tons, and natron saltpeter reserves are over 2 million tons, with more than 70 non-metallic mineral deposits. Mineral resources are abundant in Xinjiang. Among the 117 ores with proven recoverable reserves, 5 of the country's top 24 are among the top 5, and 43 are among the top 10. And then there is oil. Xinjiang's various basins, large and small, are rich in oil and gas resources with over 30 billion tons of reserves, accounting for 1/3 of the country's total. China built its first large-scale oil field in Karamay in the 1950s, defying experts' predictions that China had no oil reserves. In addition, Xinjiang's coal resources are extraordinarily rich, accounting for more than 40% of China's total coal reserve and ranking first in the country. Only 10 basins have more than 500 billion tons of coal resources, and Xinjiang has 2 of them. Qinghai is another western region in China that is abundant in resources. The Kaidam Basin in Qinghai boasts abundant resources in its salt lake, including petroleum, natural gas, and metals and non-metals like asbestos, lead, and zinc. In Qinghai, 123 different minerals have been discovered, and the exact amount of reserves for 97 of these minerals are known. Qinghai is one of the top 10 provinces in terms of mineral reserves, with 51 of these resources accounting for more than half of China's total reserves. And Qinghai has another thing that makes it highly prized. It is the source of China's 2 major rivers, the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. The Yellow River is tightly woven into the fabric of China's history. In fact, the recorded history of Chinese civilization begins with the Shah dynasty, which lasted from 2100 to 1600 BCE on the banks of the Yellow River. According to Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian and Classic of Rites, the Shah kingdom was formed by a number of different tribes in order to combat devastating floods on the river. After a series of breakwaters failed to prevent flooding, the Shah dug out a network of canals to channel excess water out into the countryside and then down to the sea. The Shah kingdom ruled China for several centuries, united behind strong leaders, and was able to produce bountiful harvests because Yellow River floods no longer destroyed their crops as frequently. Around 1600 BCE, the Shang dynasty succeeded the Shah and also centered itself on the Yellow River Valley. The Shang developed an elaborate culture based on the riches of the fertile river-bottom land, with powerful emperors, divination using oracle bones, and artwork. Similarly, the Yangtze is a prized asset for China. The Yangtze River connects China's magnificently disparate landscapes and cultures from its source on the icy Tibetan Plateau to its glittering delta on the East China Sea near Shanghai. The river also drives the country's incredible economic growth. China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty and transformed a poor agrarian society into a super economy since instituting market reform in 1978. The 700,000 square mile Yangtze River Basin supplies water, transportation, and food to nearly 1/3 of China's 1.3 billion people and accounts for more than 40% of the country's GDP. Let's hear what you think of the population